I'm surrounded by the ruins of the ancient city of David, the place where Jerusalem began. Are there connections between Jesus and the kingdom of David? Find out in this episode of the Prophetic Connection. This place, the Mount of Olives. Fulfilling the prophecy, waiting for the day when the Messiah. How exciting it is to walk in the history of the Bible. The ruins behind me date from 3,000 years ago. They're the outer walls of what we know as the city of David. But before that, this was a Jebusite stronghold called Jebus. David captured this place 3,000 years ago. He'd had his capital in Hebron for 33 years, and then he moved it here. And this is the beginning of the holy city, Jerusalem. David was special in the eyes of the Almighty God. God made covenants with the people of Israel through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But he spoke of David and said, David is a man after my own heart, and I will establish his kingdom forever. Well, as far as we know, David's kingdom seems to have ended about 3,000 years ago. Solomon, his son, reigned after him, but the kingdom was ultimately divided and seemed to have disappeared off the landscape of history forever. Or is that true? Psalm 89 records God's promise to David, the covenant that he made with him. The words are eloquent in verse 29 of Psalm 89. His seed also I will make to endure forever, and his throne as the days of heaven. If his sons forsake my law and do not walk in my judgments, if they break my statutes and do not keep my commandments, then I will punish their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. Nevertheless, my loving kindness I will not utterly take from him, meaning David. I will punish his descendants, but I will not take my loving kindness from David, much less the covenant that I have made with him. Verse 34, my covenant I will not break, nor alter the word that has gone out from my lips. Once I have sworn by my holiness, I will not lie to David. His seed shall endure forever, and his throne is the sun before me. It shall be established forever like the moon, even like the faithful witness in the sky. So God promises that David's kingdom will last forever. But is it true? Is that true? And what has that to do with Jesus of Nazareth, a descendant of King David?
Just south of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem today, archaeologists have unearthed and continue to explore what remains of the city of David. Although evidence is scarce in an area of the world that has been destroyed and plundered numerous times, archaeologists have discovered convincing proof that King David's magnificent palace once stood here.
Join me to this fabulous excavation done by Dr. Elat Mazar a few years ago. As we can see, this large excavation covers a large building. The wall is as thick as 6.5 meters, and we're looking at an infrastructure, a basis of a large palace, probably from the 10th century BCE. The pottery taken from there was as old as 3,000 years old. This is time when coins do not exist yet. So what do we know about this? We have pottery, we have ashes, we have some seeds which can date this place as probably the ancient palace of Judean kingdom. You're looking right now at a beautiful columns capital which was found here, and this capital belongs in the Phoenician style. If we are to open up the Bible, second book of Samuel chapter 5, we are to learn that Hiram, the Phoenician king, has sent David masons, copper masons and wood masons and cedar trees, and especially people who can build in stone. We are looking at a style done by Phoenicians. So if we are to find in the middle of Jerusalem a building which was built in Phoenician style, this should ring a bell as we are discussing the times of King David occupying Jerusalem about 3,000 years ago.
While observing the ruins of what once was David's magnificent palace, it is difficult to believe that God's promise to David still stands, that David's kingdom will last forever. Yet as we walk to the southernmost end of the city of David, we are transported ahead 1,000 years after David and follow in the footsteps of one of his royal descendants, Jesus of Nazareth.
Welcome to the biblical pool of Siloam. As you can see, this corner right behind me is the same corner in this drawing which the ancient pool of Siloam was spread from here all the way to south of us right now. We're looking at the best barbecue place in Jerusalem and the best country club in Jerusalem, which was here in the Second Temple period. Actually, this would be one of the very few places which Jesus could actually walk here in Jerusalem. And these pavements done by King Herod are actually the pavements that were held by Jesus as he walked here. Come with me to see the part of the pool of Siloam, and then we'll explain about what Jesus did here and when. The ancient pool of Siloam gives us an amazing story in the times of the Bible. King Herod built this pool basically for the irrigation needs of the city and mostly for accepting the huge amounts of pilgrims coming here every year, 3 times a year. The amount of findings that we have found here in this pool is huge. We're talking over 25,000 pieces of pottery, from pots, cooking pots, dishes, plates and stuff like this. We are talking 1,500 coins from the time of the Great Revolt against the Romans and back into the time of Jesus. But let's go back to the biblical times. As Jesus comes to Jerusalem, 2 miracles are happening here in Jerusalem. One of them took place in the pools of Bethesda, where Jesus took care of the lame, of the person that was disabled. The second one took place here in the pool of Siloam, as mentioned in the great book of John 9:7, and the healing of the blind man took place right here. So you can actually come today and walk in the footsteps of Jesus, step on the same pavements as Jesus did, and walk from here all the way up to Temple Mount, following the ancient street paved by King Herod and walked by Jesus. So I invite you to walk with me and follow the footsteps of Jesus from the pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount all the way up. Please do. As we said, walking in the footsteps of Jesus from the pool of Siloam, these are the original stairs done by King Herod at the time. And here we are reaching the street itself. These pavements are the street from Herod's time, the amazing drainage system of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. And if you are to walk from here, you'll see that it is as wide as ancient Champs-Élysées or Fifth Avenue. This is the Fifth Avenue of King Herod's time, temple time. As we are leaving the pool of Siloam behind, this is where we climb, ascend to Zion. Let's follow Jesus to the Temple Mount and do the Song of Ascents as the Levites did once, as they used to walk this amazing staircase leading us to the Temple Mountain.
It is amazing to think that Jesus would have walked on these very stones through the ancient city of David, but just how significant is his connection to this city and to its founder, King David?
Over my right shoulder, the Arab neighborhood of Siloam, which is directly across a valley from the ancient city of David. Siloam means Siloam, and Siloam is the pool at the bottom of the city of David. We read of it in the New Testament when Jesus healed a blind man's eyes, but he sent him with mud packs in his eyes to the pool of Siloam, and he came back from there seeing. A miracle occurred right in this place. But I want to talk about the city of David and its origins, and so for that we go back to 2 Samuel chapter 5 and verse 6. And the king, this is David, and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites. So Jebus and Jerusalem are the same, synonymous, one with the other. The inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David saying, "You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will repel you." So they say this mocking David and his army, thinking David cannot come in here because the fortress was so well defended and it's above a valley with high walls. And so they thought no one can penetrate our defenses. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. Now David said on that day, whoever climbs up by the way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. So David told his men to target the lame and the blind. Remember that David was a warrior king. He had much blood on his hands. And later on, when it came to building the temple on the Temple Mount, God said to David, you shall not build this holy temple, for you have blood on your hands. But your son, Solomon, he will build it. And it seems that here David showed no mercy. The lame and the blind, who could not really fight back, they were slaughtered because they had been used to mock David and his attacking army. And then in verse 9, then David dwelt in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And we continue to read, and we find that David had more children. He had wives and concubines, the Bible says in verse 13 of 2 Samuel 5. And then it lists the children born to him. But I want to focus on two sons in particular. The one son was named Solomon, who succeeded David as the king, and the other son was named Nathan. And I'll come back to them shortly. God had said to David, I make a covenant with you, and as long as the sun and the moon shine, my covenant with you will stand forever. If your sons disobey me, I will punish them, but I will not withhold from you our special relationship. And I am the greatest covenant keeper, God said in so many words, because I keep my word even when others on the other side of the covenant don't keep theirs. So I will keep my word to you, David, and your descendants will forever sit on the throne that you have established. Well, we come into the book of Jeremiah, and we discover that in the lineage of the kings of Israel, there was a good king named Josiah who honored God in all his ways. But his son, known as Jehoiakim or as Coniah, disobeyed God. And so because of that, a curse was placed upon him. And God said of this man, in verse 28 of Jeremiah, chapter 22, is this man Coniah a despised broken idol, a vessel in which there is no pleasure? Why are they cast out, he and his descendants, and cast into a land which they do not know? O earth, 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 hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord. This is Jeremiah speaking God's judgment. In fact, God's curse upon Coniah and his descendants. Write this man down as childless, a man who shall not prosper in his days, for none of his descendants shall prosper, sitting on the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah. Now we have a problem. We have God's promise to David that his throne will be established forever. But now the lineage is blocked by a curse uttered on the lips of Jeremiah the prophet, who said, because of Coniah's disobedience and sin, none of his descendants can ascend the throne of David. Well, we go all the way down through the Bible, and we come then to the New Testament, and we find a solution to the dilemma of what seems an incredible covenantal contradiction. We find in the genealogy of Jesus Christ that there are two sons of David. When we trace Jesus' genealogy in Matthew's account, here is what we read in the very first verse of Matthew chapter 1. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David. So important. The lineage between Jesus going all the way back to Bethlehem. Jesus was born in Bethlehem as David was before him, but Matthew will trace Jesus' lineage all the way back to David. And then we read in further down in verse 5, Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab, Boaz begot Obed by Ruth, Obed begot Jesse, Jesse begot David the king, and David the king begot Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. It was here on the rooftop of David's palace, as he walked on the palace, he looked down and he saw a beautiful woman bathing, washing herself. We know her name to be Bathsheba, but she was the wife of Uriah, another man. And David arranged for that man to be killed in the heat of battle. He tried to cover up his sin, but Nathan the prophet came to him, told him a parable about a man who stole another man's sheep. And David pronounced judgment on that man, but he didn't realize he was pronouncing judgment on himself. So we read on, and in the genealogy of Jesus Christ, in Matthew chapter 1, we come to the man Joseph. The problem is that there is a curse on this line coming down through Solomon. Coniah, who was cursed by Jeremiah. So that would mean that none of Joseph's descendants can ascend the throne of David because a curse is standing in their way. But when we move over to the Gospel of St. Luke, we find a solution to this incredible dilemma. Because we read in chapter 3 of Luke's Gospel, in verse 23, now Jesus himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age, being, and he puts this in a bracket, parenthesis, as was supposed the son of Joseph. Because Luke understands something very important. He understands that Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. And he is going to trace Jesus' genealogy from Mary back through to David. In fact, he goes beyond David all the way back to Adam in the Garden of Eden. And so in verse 31 of Luke chapter 3, we read these words: the son of Meliah, the son of Menon, the son of Mattiah, the son of Nathan, the son of David, the son of Jesse, the son of Obed, the son of Boaz. So the same genealogy, except he leaves out Coniah, because Coniah is not in Mary's line, as he is in Joseph's line. And so the important thing is, because Mary needed to be a virgin so that the seed carrying the curse that came down through Joseph's line, through Coniah, could not be passed on into Mary's body and into her seed. And so God had a way and a plan, a way in which he could keep his covenant with David, that your descendant would sit on the throne forever, and yet that curse on the other line, the line that came through Solomon, would still stand. So it's not surprising then that we find in Luke chapter 1, verse 26, now in the 6th month the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. Now think back to that passage in 2 Samuel chapter 5. David, when he captured the city of David, this Jebusite stronghold, showed no mercy. He told his warriors, kill the lame and the blind first. But 1,000 years later, a man came from Galilee who also had been born in Bethlehem. We know him as Jesus of Nazareth. He did most of his miracles in the area, the region of Galilee. But within Jerusalem itself, we know of 2 particular miracles that he did. At the pool of Bethesda, which really means house of mercy, he chose one man out of a multitude. And the tradition was that in that pool, when the waters were stirred by an angel, the first one down received a healing. And that man was paralyzed, so he couldn't get there quickly enough. And Jesus said to him, do you want to be healed? Then take up your bed and walk. He did it in a place called Mercy. Then Jesus met a blind man who couldn't see. And he made mud packs, put them on his eyes, and he said to him, go to the pool of Siloam, which is the very bottom end of the city of David. And in faith, that man somehow, some way, found his way to the pool of Siloam. He washed his eyes in its clear waters. And then gradually he began to see what he had not seen before. And so we think of David punishing the blind and the lame. And at the pool of Bethesda, Jesus raised a lame man, a paralyzed man, and enabled him to walk. And then he took a blind man who couldn't see, and he gave him his sight. at the pool of Siloam, the city of David, where that curse was to begin with. Because in David's time, people had this understanding, wrongly of course, that if a man was blind or lame, there was a curse over his generation. That's why he was that way. So when Jesus found the blind man, the people said to him, because the tradition continued for 1,000 years, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus said, not this man nor his parents, but this is for the glory of God. So there are 1,000 years between David and Jesus, a millennium. And Jesus, if you like, coming with mercy and love, undid a curse, in so many words, that stood for 1,000 years, certainly in the minds of the people of Israel, that those who are born blind or lame or have some other physical abnormality are cursed. We know it's not true. And in fact, we know it because Jesus came and healed 2 people in the holy city of Jerusalem. And in particular, that blind man he healed here, where David had slaughtered the blind and the lame. So the kingdom of David continues now through this particular descendant, also born in Bethlehem, whose name is Jesus of Nazareth. And because that is true, it means God has kept the covenant with David.